Thank you very much. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole agenda for Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. I'd like to welcome you to our Committee of the Whole meeting, which is now I'm going to call to order. Are there any declarations of interest from members? Not seeing any. I will move along to item C. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaty First Nations and other Indigenous peoples, and on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as East Gwillimbury's closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. Item D is community announcements. Are there any announcements from members of council? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate the LSRCA Foundation on a successful dinner that they had. I think we had pretty much everybody from council there, and I know that despite the fact that they didn't have a live auction, they had actually raised more than they have in the past. I know their silent auction was a big success, and I was happy enough to have won the King Cole Ducks silent auction item, which was supporting one of our local businesses. So I just wanted to congratulate the LSRCA Foundation on another wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other announcements from members of council? I'm not seeing them at this time. We'll move to item E, and that's deputations. M. Snaper, on behalf of Eye Candy Ads, is making a deputation to committee requesting a minor variance from the town's sign bylaw to erect a digital billboard at 22746 Leslie Street. Mr. Snaper, are you here? If you'd like to come up to the microphone, please. I'd just like to remind you that you have 5 minutes on the agenda, and I'll let you know when you're getting close.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm gonna go through this quick because there's quite a few slides, so we can start off with the first slide, please. Nope, that was what I submitted there. That's not the presentation now. Can I get an extra 30 seconds maybe?
I'll add a little bit on, how's that?
Oh, perfect. Well, I'll start off with, my name is Mark. I'm the owner and operator of Eye Candy Ads. We started in 2020 February, a month before COVID showed its face in Canada. I started with a digital billboard. If anybody has ever driven through Bradford, right after you get over the bridge on the side of a building, I started with that one, and that was my first billboard. Now I have 12 throughout Bradford. And here we go, perfect. Our mission statement is we make what was once impossible possible, highlighting community values through cost-effective advertising for local businesses and services. Next slide, please. So what makes Eye Candy different than other companies? So we're not your average big box billboard company. We are a mom and pop advertising agency. We specialize in cost-effective advertising for small businesses and services. We've definitely been asked to do a lot of advertising for big companies, but I turn them down left, right, and center. I have 7 small tenants. We own the property where my first billboard was, and we facilitate having a lot of small tenants, so I know what it's like and the hardships for them. So I know that being a small business doing advertising is very costly. So the premise of my business is to keep costs down for small businesses. I'm a member of 3 different Chamber of Commerce, including King. I will be a member soon of Oshawa. Yesterday I received a permit for a billboard in Oshawa, as well as Bradford and Georgina. And I was the Vice President of Marketing for the Bradford Board of Trade for 2 years. I'm also a Director for Contact Community Services based out of Alliston and Bradford. So being the VP of Marketing for the Board of Trade, I know how hard it is for small businesses to afford advertising. Next slide, please. These are some nominations and awards that I've won. From the Bradford Board of Trade, prior to me being there, I won numerous awards. I've won awards from Scott Davidson, Member of Parliament, and from Caroline Mulrooney, including home-based business, as well as startup business when I first started up. Next slide, please. Some notable products we've done are free ads for lemonade stands, youth entrepreneur programs, women's rights in Iran, anniversaries and local fundraising. During the lockdowns, we helped a studio that was going out of business raise funds, and she's still today in business, which is great. All these programs are completely free. Next slide, please. Seeing value in billboards. I received the very first ever permit for a digital billboard in Georgina. If anybody goes just north of Ravenshoe on Woodbine, the digital billboard there is mine. That's the very first ever digital billboard in all of Georgina, as well as the very first permit for third-party advertising in King Township, where they never ever had billboards for third-party. I received the first ever. And as well as the first permit for a digital billboard in Bradford. Next slide, please. This was a program, if anybody remembers a few years ago, a building caught fire displacing 25 families in Bradford. And Mike Kemp, who's retiring, the Officer of Economic Development in Bradford, he gave me a call, and right away I put this ad together, and we had a phone number set up and a website for raising funds for the displaced families. That was completely free, working with the town. And we ended up becoming on the front cover of the topic. Next slide, please. This is a letter from the Canadian Corps World War I vets who are now my landlords as of yesterday in Oshawa. They're a thank you letter for me becoming one of their tenants, and that I give free advertising for all of my landlords on my billboards for their businesses. So not only am I paying rent, but I try and help maintain their business and help advertise them as well. Next slide, please. This is a letter for charitable ads. So all non-for-profits and charities I do free advertising for. This is for the Military Day coming up in Georgina at the Military Museum. Next slide, please. My mother is a piano teacher and my father is an artist, so I have a soft spot for the arts, but I'm also living proof that it skips a generation, because I definitely... But I allocate free ads for the arts on my billboards. So the Queensville Players have a free spot on my billboard that's shared with, the next slide, please. That's shared with the Georgina Center for Arts and Culture. Both of these letters state that they've never had such a great turnout ever since we've been able to do the advertising. And I know that funding is very limited for advertising, so that's why I do free spots for many different art programs. Next slide, please. Some notable letters as well from Lions, Contact Community Services, and United Way. Also free ads for all of them throughout Bradford whenever they need. So I always maintain free spots for all of them, and these are just some of the thank you letters from them. Next slide, please. This is from Municipal Law Enforcement. This is from Mike Hutchison in Georgina, saying that since I put up my billboard, he's had not one complaint, and he's mentioned that he's used to usually getting complaints for new things coming up, but not only has he never had one, but he loves passing by to see all the local businesses and how they utilize the billboard that I put up with the different kinds of ads that we make for them or that they supply themselves. Next slide, please. This is a program I put together. So since the lockdowns, kids were stuck on their driveways, waving at their friends during their birthdays. And I thought, what better way during having to be 6 feet apart than posting kids' birthdays for free on a billboard. So there's local businesses that sponsor it, and on their birthdays, I send a scavenger hunt to the parents. And next slide, please. You can see Sophie here. She went and took her photo in front of the billboard and then got her free slice of pizza, her free ice cream, her free photos, all through the program that I've run. And I have done over 850 free birthdays so far since my company started. If anybody has nieces, nephews, or kids, grandkids, please, if you happen to see these, we post them on all our billboards. Next slide, please. Some of the clientele that I've done advertising for, you might recognize a couple names, a couple people even. Next slide, please. Digital and residential. So one of my billboards on Holland Street in Bradford, this is at the Benjamin Moore, and this is a letter from the residential tenant right upstairs saying that this being right outside her window, because I have a light meter on all my billboards, it dims the lights as the sun goes down to less than what a street light is. So this has never proposed an issue for her, and this is a letter from her. Next slide, please. So currently we have 19 plus billboards, 12 benches. We have about 14 million views monthly, and all of our billboards are made in Canada. They're made in Oakville, and I locally source all my services. So depending on where I install them, I hire tradesmen and people within the community, keeping the value in the dollar within the community. Next slide, please. This is a mock-up. So it's going to be traffic heading south from going on to Leslie, so it'll be coming into EG. So the idea is to capture the people that are coming into EG to facilitate helping awareness for different businesses and services and events and promoting the community. Next slide. So last one is why choose us? So our targeted advertising that resonates with communities, hence why we do some free advertising for different arts and different communities that we're in. The ability to support local events, which I've definitely showcased some of different events and promotions for things. The ads reflect the community, so based on the community we're in, the ads are catered and made specific to different communities. We keep the dollars within the communities and we adapt very, very quickly with different trends and changes. It's very affordable because that's why we only cater to small businesses. And we're definitely a more trusting, and the relationships we have with local businesses are very strong because when they call, they're not speaking to 2 or 3 people below, they're speaking directly with me, and I'm always available, including on weekends. And I believe that might be the last slide. And thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. You were just right on time.
Perfect.
Perfect. Questions? I'm not seeing, oh, go ahead, Councillor Lehey.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is both a recognition of the fact that our challenges recently have been a lack of media and newsprint media, and so there's sort of a void that this digital ad board potentially fills. And so I commend you also on your philosophy of advertising, that you are supporting local business, which is much needed and appreciated. My question for you is, with regard to this billboard, how can you guarantee to us in the future that your philosophy will be maintained and that you will maintain control of the billboard?
So I've got a great story that I could tell about what happened with that. I had 2 restaurants that were in Bradford that during the lockdowns, they only did takeout. And I charged them very, very few dollars to be there. And they both called me within a couple of days. And they asked me if I can end their campaigns because, times were tough. And I said, of course. A couple of days later, I saw them on a competitor's big box billboard, literally about 200 meters from mine at the GO station in Bradford. And I knew they couldn't afford to be on it. So I called both owners. And the story was that they said that company had called and offered them 2 free spots on their billboard for 6 months. I knew that was a strategic move because just shortly after I got a call from this big company asking for a meeting with me, and I said, sure, come by my office at my building. They came by from Mississauga, and I know I have 5 minutes here, but I spent probably about 5 hours with them. And they gave me an offer to buy my company, and I said, do you mind if I look it over with my lawyer, so on and so forth. And then about a week and a half later, they called and said, so what do you think? Are we going to buy you? And I said, one more quick meeting at my office. And they came by again, and about another hour and a half went by, and they said, listen, there was 2 people both times. They said, we have to get going, but how does everything look? And my response was, I love doing business with good, honorable businesses, but how come you guys are such a malicious company? And the guy was really distraught when I said that. And I said, Bradford's a small town, and I know you offered free advertising to the 2 restaurants that were on my board so that if and when you bought me, there wouldn't be contracts, and you can put the big companies like the Tim Hortons and McDonald's and so on my board. So thank you so much. And I handed back their agreement. I said, but no, thank you. It's not my way of doing business. And I've maintained that ever since.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Snaper, thank you for your presentation. I certainly do feel that you're community-minded and so on. And I don't have an objection to the way that you're doing business whatsoever. That said, our bylaw doesn't permit digital signboards, and there were some reasons why we don't permit it. And I'd be open to, it's been some time since we looked at our sign bylaw, and so if there's appetite here at the table to look at this, then I would rather refer this to staff and have a report to us about why we didn't include them. And I can say that having been here long enough, part of it was that we didn't want distracted driving. We weren't able to control the light pollution, the content on those boards, and that they didn't project the kind of image that we wanted to project in our community. And so it's not anything against any particular business owner, but simply that object, the electronic digital signboard in general, and putting them on allowing one creates that slippery slope for you to come back and ask for 6 or 7 more, and we don't end up having that much. So we need to be thoughtful and mindful about this decision if we want to entertain it. So from my perspective, I know why we don't have the signboards, and I respectfully would suggest that I wouldn't be supportive of it, but I'm open to listening to more from my colleagues and to hear from staff. Thank you.
And can I say something to it? To reply, the similar kind of attitude came from King Township, where they actually never had third party, and they had given me the first ever permit for third party in general. It was a static billboard, and their idea was, we're gonna give you a permit even though we don't allow it, with the idea that we're gonna see how things go. And similar to Georgina, where they never had any digital billboards, and I received the very first ever permit, where they didn't allow digital. With Mike Hutchinson, that's why one of the letters that I have from him stating that, we haven't given any other permits. Recently, they gave one more, but that was because of the lack of complaints and the benefit that it showed to the community. So definitely, surrounding EG, being in Bradford and King and in Georgina, we've definitely posed a benefit to every single community we're in. And if there was an opportunity to be able to receive a permit contingent on seeing over the next little while how the community receives it, that would be something that, hopefully everybody's open to, because I strive to be able to showcase that we're a benefit to the community, we're a benefit to the small businesses in the community, and that's what I've premised my entire company on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. In a previous life, I was a media manager for Burger King. So we were up against McDonald's. We couldn't compete with them with their television dollars. And so I took them into outdoor for the first time. And it was hugely successful. So I'm very supportive of outdoor. We didn't have digital back then. They were all standard billboards. But I'm looking at this location. I'm very supportive of Councillor Roy DiClemente referring this back to staff to relook at our bylaw. I would be interested in this as a sort of pilot. I wouldn't want to open up the bylaw and get 10 or 12 billboards all at once. Let's open this up once. I'm wondering if you have, I'm also thinking about, as a town, can we get our messages on those boards? Who would they reach? And I'm wondering if you have data on impressions per day and where people are coming from, because I'm looking at the location and thinking, this would be great if you're Georgina, because you got your people commuting south, but I'm not sure there's East Gwillimbury people coming south out of Georgina. So I'm just thinking, putting on my hat as what can we do for our communications here? So do you have data on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have traffic counts of traffic coming onto Leslie at about 12,000 cars a day, heading onto Leslie, so whether it's coming from Ravenshoe, turning left or right, or coming across the street.
Yeah.
But in a similar manner, with the Georgina Center for Arts and Culture, they had a turnout that wasn't a very community-oriented per se. It was a lot of cottage goers and people that had no idea the Center for Arts and Culture existed in Sutton. So because of the ads that were on the billboard, not only did they sell out one of their shows, but it was from people that were mainly cottage goers that were, unbeknownst to them, the place existed. So in a similar manner, to be able to facilitate advertising events for the community or events for the town, as well as businesses that are within EG, I think it gives them an opportunity that once wasn't there, with traffic that is coming in droves through the community on Leslie.
Excellent point. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Other questions? Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question through you. Do any of the municipalities that you're working with, do you have revenue share models with those municipalities?
Not with the municipality per se, but I do have revenue share models with my landlords.
Are there other questions? Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I would certainly support Councillor Roy DiClemente's thought about throwing this back to staff. And the things that pop to mind are distracted driving for sure. It's something that I think we need to have a little bit more information on. But you mentioned about 12,000 vehicles a day. If 3/4 of those vehicles are Georgina residents or from further that are entering East Gwillimbury, yes, they may bring business to East Gwillimbury, and we would all support that. But when you talk about town advertising, we have Canada Day coming up. So we throw a Canada Day ad up on there. and 3/4 of the people that look at it are from Georgina, they're very likely to go to Georgina, not East Gwillimbury. So I'm not sure the bang for the buck that we're going to get from that. So some information back from staff, I think, might, with your input, may give us some better information to make that decision.
Can I answer that too?
Go ahead.
So with respect to distracted driving, I would say if there was any worry with that, then Dundas Square would be inundated with accidents on the regular, as well as Times Square. There's no reported accidents in front of any of my digital billboards. They just started building billboards on the 400 series highways with en route. So if you see going into Barrie, and that's going over 100 kilometers an hour. So billboards have never posed a distracted driving because of the size of them. There's a standard size of a 10-foot by 20-foot that they're seen far apart, far away enough that as you're passing, you don't look to see them close up. But there's never been proposed any distractions. And if anybody ever drives on the Gardiner, it's inundated with digital billboards, as well as every interstate in the United States. Most major cities in the world are inundated with billboards, and there's been numerous studies by many billboard companies that they do not pose any distracted driving. Many moons ago, on all the 400 series highways, they actually built the billboards that everybody knows today as the ones that are black with the orange writing. Those are actually full color digital billboards, but those are the ones on every 400 series highway, whether they're saying, keep your seatbelt on and so on. Those have been there for a long time, and those have never posed any distractions at all. Here, the one that I'm proposing, hopefully the idea is that, we can get shovels in the ground prior to a frost line, because the second the winter gets close, we can't do any installations. And the benefit to the community is giving the drivers that pass by the ability to know that these events even exist. Similar to what I said before with the Georgina Center for Arts and Culture, the people that were coming from cottage country from Toronto had no idea the center existed, and they were able to sell out their events where they never had done that before.
Thank you. Councillor Leahy, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. I have one follow-up question with regard to a comment about getting our bang for our buck in terms of the town, but is my understanding correct that there is no fee, no cost to the town of East Gwillimbury with the installation, that you're doing this free of charge for the town of East Gwillimbury? Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is all borne by me, all the costs of the installation. The billboard costs approximately $250,000 to install. And the way that the billboards work is there's a standard of 10 ads, and I allocate a certain amount of ads to the charities, non-for-profits, the communities. So that way, if there's any things that happen within the community, like with Bradford, with the fire, right away Mike Kemp called me and he said, hey, listen, can we put something up? And I said, I'm already working on the artwork as we speak. So definitely, I love to work with communities, because I think to be able to work within a community gives the benefit to that community.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Could I have a mover, please?
Sorry,
Councillor
through you,
Leahy,
Madam
go
Mayor.
ahead,
Yes,
please.
through you, Madam Mayor, before we vote on this, were we going to amend it to put it back to staff, or we were just going to vote on it as is?
I'm waiting for a motion. We do have one in front of us, but that certainly can be altered to fit our needs. Councillor Roy DeClemente, you were talking about making some changes, I believe.
It was simply just, I wanted to hear from my colleagues, and I see Councillor Carruthers Burger King, and I raise you a father who used to buy advertising for Imperial Tobacco.
Oh,
So, also have a history in outdoor advertising.
the media moguls are here. And you're representing city council, so we know there's a need.
So I guess from my perspective, I was happy to simply receive it. I don't see that this is a minor variance with our sign bylaw. If committee would like to hear more about it, then I'm happy to put forward a motion that would direct staff to report back to us on the history. Is that where you guys would like to go?
I'm seeing
So-
the nods.
So, Madam Mayor, therefore, I will move that we receive the deputation and that we refer the matter to staff for a report back on the matter.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, please.
And just to be clear, we'd like to see a variety of options. So it's not just about wholesale change to the bylaw, but could we do a pilot? Could we have some sort of exception? What would be our options to support something like this?
Thank you. I guess my intent was that staff would report to us on why it isn't included, and should council want to entertain the idea, here are some options for moving forward. And let us make that decision from there. Thank you.
I'd be happy to be your pilot project.
Thank you. So you're moving that then. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are at item F in presentations committee to advise Hall as a nominee of the 2024 Ontario Senior of the Year Award, and I'll pass this to Councillor LaHaye to speak to this item.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Mayor. It's with great pleasure that we are in a position where we can acknowledge and recognize the outstanding nominee of the 2024 Ontario Senior of the Year Award. And I'd just like to share a few words from the nomination about Bev. Bev Hall is an extraordinary local East Gwillimbury dynamo and well-deserving recipient of being nominated for this award. She combines her talents as an artist with a generous spirit of volunteerism. So some of the highlights from the very long list of activities that resulted in this nomination include organizing the annual Hollyberries Christmas show since 2013. 100% of the proceeds go back to the Holland Landing Lions Community Centre, and to date there has been more than $14,000 raised, and she even organized during COVID a virtual version of the Hollyberries Christmas show. She is current president of the Mount Albert Group of Artists, writing and publishing their newsletter, as well as curating and setting up Mount Albert Group of Artists art exhibitions at local venues such as the Lions and Sun Restaurant, the Lighthouse Cafe, and the Mount Albert Public Library. Since 2019, Bev has served on the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, becoming vice chair in 2023. She has spearheaded the paddle project, the profits from the sales for which are donated to the Mayor's Youth and Community Initiative Fund. And from concept to execution, Bev has provided EG with this iconic identifier of the paddle, linking the Holland River waterway and its rich history of our town. She co-curates the Equinox and Solstice art exhibits at the Civic Centre right here outside the council chambers, which everyone enjoys, which brightens the colours of the walls, and she served on the town's Lunar New Year inaugural committee this year for East Gwillimbury. Her volunteer work even extends beyond EG, and prior to COVID, she organized art programs at an orphanage in Panama. So in all of Bev's endeavors, she is enthusiastic and delights in sharing her skills and experience both as an artist and a volunteer, creating the fabulous dragons that were center stage at the New Year's celebrations. A sincere thank you to Bev, for without your exceptional volunteer work, EG would not have such a thriving arts community, and your efforts continue to make EG a more beautiful place. And I have a last-minute update, which is that Bev has already started organizing the 2024 version of the Hollyberries Artisan Christmas Show with more than 60 vendors, and we will ask you to save the date so that you can attend on November 2nd this year. So thank you very much to Bev Hall for all of your volunteer work, and I will revert back to you, Madam Mayor. I understand that we're going to make a presentation of some certificates to Bev in the hallway outside of the chamber now.
Thank you. We'll move this and pass it, and then take our break. Be it resolved that the committee recognize B. Hall as a nominee of the 2024 Ontario Senior of the Year Award. And that's moved by Councillor LaHaye. All those in favor? And that's carried. And we'll take a break, and perhaps I could say 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to the rest of our agenda.
Thank you. Sorry, before we proceed,
Yes.
I have been corrected that there needs to be a correction. A nominee. She is in fact the winner of the Senior of the Year Award for the province of Ontario, specifically the municipality of East Gwillimbury. And so I would ask that the town clerk reflect that in the minutes, that she is in fact the winner. And that I understand it was to be a surprise, and that's why it was as nominee in the agenda. But she is in fact the winner and should be duly recognized as such. So thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Very good,
Yep.
very good. With that, we will move along to item H, Finance, with Councillor Johnson, the chair.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So first item up on the agenda today is, as this time of year comes, is our 2023 draft audited financial statement. So we're hoping for a mover to get this tabled, and then we'll pass it over to Mr. Marshall. Is there a mover to get this tabled? Councillor Crone, thank you so much. Mr. Marshall, turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The first part of the session, as part of our year-end process, we're required to have our financial statements audited by an external firm. KPMG are the town's external auditors, and we have Kevin Travers and Andrew Grossi here from KPMG, and they're here to present their findings regarding the town's the year-end audit of the town's 2023 financial statement. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Travers. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone, and good afternoon. We'll speak to the audit findings report, and there's a lot of material here, so I have no intention of reading every slide, so everyone breathes a collective sigh of relief. So I'll speak to what I consider to be the highlights, so I can direct the person controlling slides. I am joined today by Andrew Grossi, Senior Manager, so we will respond to questions at the conclusion of the formal part of the presentation. But if I could ask that we move to the slide entitled Audit Highlights. I think it's a couple in. Thanks. So this is really what I would refer to as our audit on a page. So it speaks to the items that we are going to highlight in this afternoon's presentation, starting with the status, and I'll start in terms of our comments on the status of where the audit is. We finished our work. The only things that are outstanding at this point in time are completing our conversations with this group today, understanding the council approves the financial statements. At that point in time, we're prepared to issue our signed, unqualified, or clean audit opinion. The financial statements for the town of East Gwillimbury for the year ended December 31st, 2023. In terms of items that we're going to speak to, we'll speak to materiality, how it's set, the risks, the areas of audit focus, audit misstatements that are corrected, or excuse me, uncorrected, and you'll see in terms of commentary on control deficiencies that the radio button is switched to off. And that is to say we did not note during the performance of our audit any significant internal control deficiencies, which obviously is a good news story. In the current year, in terms of items that we're going to speak to, the two key items were the adoption of two new accounting standards, one dealing with asset retirement obligations and the other dealing with financial instruments. So these are standards that every public sector entity were required to adopt in the current year. So if you're looking at the financial statements of any other municipality, you will see a significant change with respect to the presentation of asset retirement obligations. And I'll speak to that in a moment. If we could move a couple of slides, please. Keep going. I spoke about status already. We'll go one more in terms of setting materiality. So just to give an overview of what materiality means in terms of in the audit context, materiality is the value that we set based upon the various metrics within your financial statements that we can otherwise evaluate audit misstatements. So determining if there is an uncorrected item, if it approaches the materiality value, we would have a difficult time signing an unqualified opinion. It also allows us to do our scoping in terms of doing our sampling. So you'll see that materiality in the current year was set at $2.1 million. This is based upon your total revenue value. We also look at other metrics. So we'll look at total assets, we'll look at total expenses to ensure that our materiality makes sense in the context of other metrics. You'll also see on the slide something that we refer to as audit misstatement posting threshold, which is $105,000. So what that means is if we encountered an error that was below $105,000 in value, we would consider that error to be clearly trivial to your financial statements taken as a whole, and we wouldn't necessarily report it. However, I want to provide the comfort to this group that that doesn't mean if we found an error of any dollar value that we simply ignore it, and I'll give you a couple of illustrative examples. So if we found an error, we'll pick $90,000 as an example. We found an error that was $90,000 that we believed was caused by either an internal control that wasn't functioning the way it was intended to, or that wasn't in existence. We'd bring it forward to this group today to say, here's an opportunity to strengthen your control environment. Similarly, if we found an error of any dollar value, which we consider to be related to something more sinister in nature, well, obviously we have responsibilities in that particular case as well too. So while we have this posting threshold, it simply means if we found an error that was just due to an estimate difference or something like that that was $90,000, it's clearly immaterial to your financial statements, and we wouldn't otherwise bring it forward. If we can go to the next slide, please. So speaking with respect to the presumption of fraud risk, so we're required to presume that there's a fraud risk that exists relating to either revenue recognition or to management's ability to override controls. These are not risks related to fraud that we consider to be specifically elevated when it comes to the town of East Gwillimbury. Every single financial statement audit we perform, the standards require us to presume that these risks are in existence, and then to first design and then to perform procedures to sufficiently mitigate these risks to an acceptably low level. So this slide and the next slide just give you an indication of the types of procedures that we performed and the fact that there were no issues. So if we can skip 2 slides, please. Yes, so I mentioned earlier about the requirement to adopt the asset retirement obligation standard. So what this means is it's not that there's something new that was discovered by the organization or by the town. It requires all public sector organizations to look at all of their owned assets to determine whether or not they have a legal obligation when this particular asset at end of life to incur any costs. So the most common examples of that would fit the category of legal obligations at the end of life for assets are buildings that were constructed pre-1990, because these buildings are presumed to have asbestos contamination. In and of themselves, they're not necessarily a hazard. They become a hazard when you move or jostle these types of things. So when the asset is demolished, there are requirements to incur costs. So this was always the case in terms of having this responsibility. But the accounting standards in the past, you simply would have just accounted for the expense when you incurred them. The standards have changed such that you are now required to recognize a liability right now relating to the end of life. So the actual expenditures relating to these remediation efforts are likely to be many, many years down the road, but you're now required to adopt liability reporting. There were 2 options available to the town in terms of the recognition or the adoption of the standard. One was to do it on a prospective basis, meaning starting with your 2023 calendar year forward, and the other was to do what's called a modified retroactive adoption of the standard, meaning that we would have changed your 2022 comparatives to also show what the liability would have been a year ago. The town has chosen the prospective method of adoption, so that's why you don't see any liability in the 2022 column for this. So it did require a certain degree of estimation techniques by the town. We worked with the town. They did get third-party assistance in determining their estimate, and we're satisfied that the liability that's recorded in the financial statements is an appropriate liability. If we can go to the next slide, please. And this speaks to the adoption of the financial instrument standard. So the financial instrument standard now requires that if there are certain types of instruments held by the town, that they be revalued at market on an annual basis, and the change in the market value be presented through a statement called the Statement of Remeasurement Gains and Losses. The town is has taken the stance that none of their investments meet the classification requirement to be shown at market value, and so continues to record their items at cost, but market value being disclosed within the financial statements. It's our belief that the investment in a principal protected note would meet the classification as being a derivative instrument, and the change in the market value is not material, but it is listed in our uncorrected items. It's not a significant item from our standpoint. It doesn't impact our ability to sign a clean audit opinion. If we could go to the next slide, please. So tangible capital assets are obviously a significant area of audit focus. This slide just provides a high-level indication of the type of work that we performed in that particular area, and again, that there were no issues noted. We can go to the next slide, please. This speaks to revenue and deferred revenue. It's a key item from an audit standpoint in terms of ensuring that the amounts collected are recorded as revenue in the appropriate period. There are some types of revenue streams for which the recognition criteria have not been met, or where there are continuing performance obligations for the town. In those particular cases, they're presented as deferred revenue. We had no issue in terms of the recognition criteria of revenue or the presentation of deferred revenue. We can move to the next slide, please. We'll skip over this item too. We'll move to the next slide. Just to speak to the total of uncorrected misstatements, there was also mention of, there was an item relating to, an accrual relating to billings that was recorded in the current period and was picked up by management, but it really related to at the end of the year last year. It was not material to the financial statements taken as a whole, but technically it's a 2022 item. And that's why it's presented here too. You can see why the net of the uncorrected items is far lower than materiality value that we had suggested earlier. Neither item is what we would consider to be indicative of a systemic or significant control deficiency. So we're certainly comfortable, as I said, moving forward with the financial statements being presented the way they are, receiving an unqualified or clean audit opinion. If we could move to the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, there were no significant control deficiencies noted during the performance of our audit work. Had we encountered something that we thought was an opportunity for strengthening the controls in this particular area relating to significant deficiencies, we would have brought it forward. If we could move to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, with respect to this item that was a 2022 item that management did note and did discover themselves, really relates to a 2023 item. We've done work to ensure that the 2023 accrual is complete and appropriate, so we do not think that this is an ongoing or systemic issue. In fact, at the end of December 31, 2023, the financial statements are accurate and correct with respect to these types of items. So we do bring it forward as something for management to continue to be mindful of and to ensure that going forward that we're complete on these items. We can move to the next slide, please. So these are just comments with respect to the selection of policies. We talked about the adoption of asset retirement obligations as well as financial instruments. No issues noted. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the appendices we'll take as being read. I do thank you for your attention to this matter today, and Andrew and I would be happy to respond to any questions that you have.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. I will turn to my council colleagues if questions or comments for your presentation. We have Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our presenter, thank you very much for the information and all your hard work on this. I'm not going to ask any detailed questions because that's probably best served by asking our treasurer, but in a general sense, and you have the luxury of dealing with many other municipalities where we tend to, we're dealing in the bubble that is East Gwillimbury. So you get to see a lot of other organizations in operation. When you compare us to our peer group, where would you say we're overperforming? And is there an area that you could say that we're underperforming?
Through the chair, that's a very good question. It's difficult for me to respond to. And from a financial reporting standpoint, I will say that we're very pleased with the level of planning that goes into your financial reporting on an overall basis. We have good communication with your finance group. This is our second year as your external auditors. So, and in our first year, because of just trying to get contracting sorted out, it took us a little while longer to get started than we would have otherwise liked to. But we're very pleased with the type of communication back and forth that we receive with management. It is very helpful to conduct an efficient audit, and there's still opportunities to get that better. So we appreciate the give and take relationship that we have with management. So that's very, very refreshing from our end. In terms of areas that I might say that there are areas for improvement, there's nothing that immediately comes to mind. If there were something that we thought that you were certainly behind, you would have seen it in the report.
Okay. So to paraphrase, we're the best.
Sure sounds like I said that, but don't tell anyone else I said that, please.
I'm teasing. This last question, and I ask this every year, so my colleagues won't be surprised. If you were in my boots, what would keep you up at night?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question too. Through the chair, the types of items that we share often in the appendices are items that I think from a governance standpoint are worthy of being considered. And they may sound at this point in time like they're items that you've seen and heard from many other places, but when it comes to dealing with cyber type attacks, what we're dealing with, they're very important. And you can see it doesn't take, you can look at what Hamilton's gone through, Toronto Public Library Board. There are folks out there that are constantly trying. If you have a website and if you're in the public sector, you're a target. And it used to be a few years ago, and I was just sharing with my colleague, it used to be a few years ago when we had these types of conversations, it used to be about, what are you doing to protect yourselves? And all of those types of considerations are still relevant, but I would say today the types of considerations that are equally relevant are what are we going to do when we're hit? So it's more about business continuity planning. If you think back to pre-pandemic, there are many municipalities that didn't have, their finance staff didn't have laptop computers, they had desktop, so they couldn't work remotely. It seems simple enough now to think that, and you can look around this room, see everyone with their laptops to know that now people have changed in terms of the way they do that particular part of their business. So business continuity planning is essential. So whether it's risk management in that one particular area, because cyber is something that we're hearing more and more about, or in other areas. I mean, what are we doing to make sure we can keep the lights on everywhere across the board? So that would be something I would say is something that's very important and worthy of consideration.
Yeah, there are members of committee. Questions, comments? Wonderful. I will just say I'd like to thank the staff at EG. I know that doing audits, answering all those wonderful queries that you have, they're so wonderful. But I just want to say that I sincerely appreciate all your hard work and effort because it is a process to go through. So thank you to our awesome finance department that we have here. Councillor Crone, you moved it. All those in favor? Motion carries. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next under finance, we have a report regarding a development charge bylaw amendment. So I'd love to be able to have somebody move that for me so we get it tabled. Councillor Foster, thank you so much. Back to you, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. So just quickly, the town approved a development charge update to its bylaw back in April, and it did not include growth studies, which were removed by Bill 23. Bill 185 then came into force June 6, which reinstated growth studies as being eligible for collection from development charges. And this report and amendment is going to include the growth studies back into our charge. And in accordance with the legislation, we're not required to do any public meetings or anything like that. We can just pass an amendment to our bylaw. So that's the report is trying to do. Thanks.
Members, thank you, Mr. Marshall. Any members of committee questions, comments from Mr. Marshall? So point of clarification, my colleague just leaned over just for clarification on the motion. I assumed that when we were moving it, it included the resolution that was underneath. I'm happy to provide clarity, but Councillor Foster did move this motion, and I am of the belief that the motion moved is the resolution that is below that. If they can, yeah, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. It's hard when we don't say what the motion is that we're moving. So the draft audited financial statements be received. That was the presentation we had from the auditors. There is also a staff report that I wasn't sure if Mr. Marshall wanted to speak to, because there's a whole staff report in there. So we have further recommendations that about the appendixes on that report. So I wasn't sure if there was more information that we wanted, and if we can just be clear on what we're voting on when it comes to the vote, that would be appreciated. Because I thought I was just voting in favor of receiving the presentation before us, assuming that the report from staff would also be presented. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. So just as a point of clarification, when I moved it with the semicolon in the end, that's what I moved. So I know that we have the current motion that we have on the table, and if we would like to come back to the audited, we can if there's clarity. But to that end, would you like me to read this out, or?
I think it's important to know what we're voting on.
Okay.
Sorry, some people are on the phone, and they have reached out to me saying that when we don't say what we're voting on, it's very confusing for them. So I think when we're voting, we need to say what we're voting on.
Great. So the motion that was tabled was, be it resolved that the finance report FIN 2024-06 dated June 25th, 2024, entitled 2024 Development Charge Bylaw Amendment be received, and that the proposed amendments that have been used in the calculation of the development charge rates be approved, and that council confirms that it intends that the amendments used in the calculation of the development charge rates shall be paid for by development charges or other similar charges, and that council determine no public meetings are required under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act as amended by Bill 185, and that council enacted an amendment to townwide development charge bylaw effective June 25th, 2024, and that the recommendations of this council be ratified at June 25th, 2024 council meeting, period. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. So just going back just to address the other motion, would we need 2/3 to reopen it again for discussion? or Mr. Clerk, do you want to navigate us through this if we are looking to reopen the issue?
Mr. Chair, I think it is maybe a little unclear, probably for committees, maybe best understanding, it would be best to do the reconsideration and then separate out the two motions so it's clear for everyone.
Councillor Crothers?
So my question was just that, we had a staff report that Mr. Marshall wasn't able to speak to, and I just wanted to know if the intention was that he wasn't going to speak to it, that's great, but since this is being ratified, I just think we should give him the opportunity to speak to the report. It's getting ratified today, so we're rushing this through without even giving him the microphone. So I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. If it's fine, then I'm fine to move ahead. I don't think we need to re-vote on it. I just want to know if there was any more information that we missed in our haste. Thanks.
So to that end, just because we've already voted on it, Mr. Clerk, do we need a motion to table to speak to it again?
Mr. Chair, I think maybe the question is just if Mr. Marshall had any further comments, and then committee would be able to move on without revoting. I think is what we're hearing.
Sure. Mr. Marshall.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the report is looking to ratify the financial statements there and the surplus allocation that was approved in principle back in April. There's a minor adjustment to that reserve allocation, $6,000 adjustment that is required based on the findings of the audit. Otherwise, it's the same as what had been seen in April by council and adopted in principle.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, again, Mr. Clerk, so there's a question. Procedurally, we don't need to table something? I'm just stuck on this, that we're talking about something we already voted on, that's all. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think if it's a question of clarification on just the statement, it's not affecting the outcome of the vote, but I don't know without.
Cool,
without
okay,
hearing
fair
it,
enough.
so-
And that's, again, that's why I'm asking the question. So Councillor Crothers.
Not asking to reopen the vote. I just wanted to get an understanding of why this has to be ratified today. Just for clarity, it's being ratified at today's council meeting, and normally we wait until the next meeting, and I just wanted to, for people who are listening in, why we are moving these things forward very rapidly.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the Municipal Act requires that financial statements be approved by council within 6 months after year end. So if we waited till the next council session, that would be past the 6-month time frame.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. So next on the agenda, it's item 3. It's a finance memo, potential fee relief, Sharon Masonic Lodge. Be it resolved that the finance memorandum dated June 25th, 2024, entitled Potential Fee Relief, Sharon Masonic Lodge, be received. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Crone. I will turn it to Mr. Marshall if you'd like to speak to it.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. Simply, this memo is based on a request from the Sharon Masonic Lodge to waive zoning bylaw and site plan approval fees, and that request was referred back to staff. And basically, this memo indicates that in accordance with the fees and charges bylaw, which these charges are generated from, staff don't have the ability to waive or alter any of the fees.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Do any members of the committee have any comments or questions? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this coming back to us. I know we had the deputant here, Mr. Bolster from the lodge, looking for some relief to their fees that were higher than what they had expected. I know in the past we have, with certain groups, we have afforded relief, whether it be through a deferral or a reduction. I think we need to empower staff going forward that we don't have to do this every time. I would like to see something where we could offer some relief, some deferral, whatever, to service organizations in our town, nonprofits, not-for-profits, and any sort of charitable organization. I think that, you know, they contribute to the community. I think we can give back. Certainly the Masons have been good members of our community for over 100 years and have contributed, helping out those in need. And in fact, you know, you look at the history in this town, we have a number of street names that are after Masons. You know, Colonel Whaling is one of them. Doan Road, Bogue Road, all former Masons. So there's a history here. I think we need to do something not just for the Masons, but for those groups that I've listed. Happy to hear feedback from my council colleagues, but I think we need to do something.
Thank you, Councillor Cronin. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
While I understand that there are groups in our community who do incredible, wholesome work and give back to us, there's a reason why we have these fees and charges, that there is a cost to the community, there's a cost to the municipality to process these applications, and there should have been no surprises for any of these organizations when they're starting to undertake this sort of work. And in this case, they undertook work without even having those permits in place. And so this is an after-the-fact situation. And so there's two things. One is we have these for a reason, and they should be universally applied, because the minute you start to say, okay, what about you? You have a slippery slope. And I think there's other ways that we can support these groups in our community other than waiving our fees and charges bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Foster and then Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if, you know, service groups, not-for-profit, that type of thing, not necessarily fee relief, but is there an opportunity for us to give them an extended period of time to pay? So we're not actually doing it any cheaper, but we're giving them the option to stretch those payments out over a defined period of time. And I would look to staff to come up with something that might work for both parties.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Leahy.
I too was, thank you through you, Mr. Chair, I too was going to suggest some sort of compromise in this situation, because my understanding from correspondence as well as the deputation that was made earlier was that there may have been some miscommunication, that they find themselves in this situation. And so I would like to suggest a compromise of a reduction in the fees on this one-time basis, acknowledging the fact of their contributions to the community, that it be reduced significantly, at least by half, in terms of this one-time exception that would be made to this organization. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. If we're looking at deferral or a reduction for not-for-profits, would we include residents in that? If residents were having trouble paying the fees, would we defer time? Because I know some residents can be struggling and may need help in that way. So I'm not sure what our current practice is with respect to that, but I think it's something that we have to consider at the same time.
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Leahy.
One final comment. I think that it's a completely different situation when you're dealing with an individual resident versus an organization that's been contributing to the community and continues to contribute to the community. And I recall from the presentation that was made by Mr. Bolster that he made the point that they would rather see the funds go back into the community. And so I think that's important to consider. So in terms of the motion that was made by Councillor Crone, I was going to suggest a friendly amendment to find a solution to this today, if possible.
Thanks, Councillor Leahy. There were some other hands that went up around the table, and then we can definitely come back to discussing what an amendment would look like if so desired. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked the deputant when he was here if they were a registered charity, and they are not. And so we don't have the accountability to even be able to confirm who the members of their organization are, what their finances are, any of that sort of thing. They're not a registered charity, so even if we were to be considering this, there's no accountability to confirm that they actually are who they say they are from that perspective. And I'm not questioning that their motivation or anything of the sort, but my concern is if we were open to waiving fees and charges, it would be for a registered charity and not necessarily just an organization that claims to do great work in our community or that does great work in our community. Secondly, the circumstances that we find ourselves in, if I'm not mistaken, this organization started work without permits. And so under the way that we work, fines would be doubled. So your building permit fee would be double, not half, but double. So from my perspective, there are members of this group who have been involved with other projects in our community who started without permits. This is not the first time this has happened. And so whether it's this position or this group or another, I've been very clear that I'm not interested in waiving our organizational structure for the purposes of one group, be they good-spirited or not.
We have Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Crone.
Thanks. I didn't get a answer to my questions. I was asking if we do any sort of deferral for residents. And now with Councillor Roy DiClemente's comments about the doubling of fees because they proceeded without a permit, I would also like staff to clarify that as well so we know exactly what we're talking about. Thanks.
Of course. So Mr. Marshall, maybe for the first one, or direct us to the appropriate person.
So through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of deferral of fees and charges, we do not defer any fees and charges. We have during COVID, in terms of the taxes and water bills, we did work with some of the residents who are having issues paying on time with some type of payment plan, and we had noted that to council as we went through that through correspondence and memos. So that's basically the type of deferrals that we would do.
Thanks. Can I just get clarification before we answer the second question that Councillor Carruthers? So there isn't a policy that exists for staff to engage in the framework of deferrals. However, there is previous communication that allowed staff to allow for some type of negotiation on payments. Is that what you just said?
So through you, Mr. Chair, correct. The first part is correct. There's no direction provided by council to give staff the ability to negotiate any payment plans in terms of the fees that are imposed on the fees and charges bylaw. As a form of relief during COVID, we had suggested that we would provide some payment options for those who are having trouble paying their bills, and that was communicated to council, which was endorsed.
And sorry, to follow up to that, what was the timeline that you deferred those payments to?
So generally, they went anywhere up to 18 months to a year, or to 2 years.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Carruthers, on your second question regarding permits, I will look to Ms. Bégin.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask our chief building official to speak to that, as the bylaw does permit or require the doubling of fees where works have been undertaken without a permit, but this situation is somewhat unique, so you can speak to the specifics.
Thank you. Sorry, I've lost track. Who's the chair? Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the building bylaw, the way it's written is, we have a schedule, fee schedule. The fee schedule goes through a public consultation process. It is not really open to negotiation after the bylaw has actually been approved. So, to answer your question, there really isn't any relief from the building permit fees. The doubling of the permit fees came about as a result of previous developers who decided to build without permits. And so to compensate for some of the legal costs and some of the other enforcement activities for the building branch, that's made up with the doubling of the fees. So that's where the doubling of fees comes from. There are other municipalities that also have doubling of the fees, and that's been challenged in court, and it's been thrown out. It's not considered to be a fine, it is actually a fee.
Thank you. Just in follow-up, what is the operating reserve that you're working on?
The building enforcement reserve? The building enforcement reserve is around $16 million.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers, follow-up?
Yes, thank you. So what is the total fees that we're talking about, and have we imposed the doubling of the fees on the Sharon Masonic Lodge?
I don't have those numbers before me, so I can't really answer that question.
Okay, so we're talking about a reduction or a deferral. I think we're going to need to know exactly how much. It looks like Mr. Marshall.
Over to you, sir. Mr. Marshall?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the initial fees were a bit over $17,000.
My question is, have they been doubled? I want to know exactly what we're talking about here. Are they owing us $17,000, or are they owing us double that?
I don't believe, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that's the doubling of the fee. That's the flat fee.
That's the flat fee. So
Correct.
are we doubling the fees?
No, we have not doubled the fees.
Okay, and then why not? Because it sounded like you were making a case for why we do double the fees.
Because it was, through you, Mr. Chair, because it was partially a demolition. They haven't actually committed to building anything. Okay. So they were caught before actually constructing what they wanted.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be very clear here that, and I think I want to be careful that we're not maligning an organization because there was, I think, an unfortunate approach that they took. There was some miscommunication, not proper understanding, but to say that it was intentional and that they did it willfully is not accurate. I think and once they were informed of their mistakes, they stopped quickly. And I was very glad to hear about that. And they have, Mr. Zoni, I'm sure you can confirm that they have cooperated with your department every step of the way since we've had to intervene. Am I correct in that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they've been attempting to comply, yes, both with the planning department and the building branch.
Okay. Secondly, appreciate that feedback. I think they've tried to be very respectful in this matter, so I want to be very careful that we don't misrepresent what they've been doing. Secondly, I think we have an opportunity here to recognize that we have done deferrals and exceptions for groups in the past. Habitat for Humanity in 2015 was one of them. They are, I don't know if they're a charity, maybe they are a charity, but I'm also talking not just about charities, we're talking about service organizations, we're talking about nonprofits and not-for-profits, okay? These are groups, and this goes back almost 9 years since we had the last request for this from a charity. We don't get these often. We talk about a slippery slope. There's a very mild incline to that slope, so I'm not worried about an avalanche here. Let's be serious. And I think we even, with the private sector, we've done some flexibility around what we do on Leslie Street in this ward. So we've done this before. We've got an organization here that does a lot of good in the town, that has a history. I'm quite happy to put forward, I'll share this now, but I think this is something that I think if I could amend my original motion that council direct staff to offer a deferral not to exceed 10 years for application of fees, application and DC fees upon request. This deferral will be provided to service, not-for-profit, nonprofit, and charitable organizations. These municipal fees will be paid over the deferral period. I'll share that with you, Mr. Clerk. If you wanted to share that, happy to entertain any amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crone. Sorry, you've given this motion to the clerk. The clerk is working to, okay. Allow time for folks to kind of ruminate on what you said while the clerk is loading that up, and we have Councillor Leahy looking to comment.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I am happy to express my support of the motion that Councillor Crone has put forward, and I will provide a refresher with regard to with their presentation, their deputation, when they did indeed list some of the many contributions that they make, which include to the neonatal unit at South Lake Hospital. So we do need to be reminded of the great work that they do, in fact, do for the community.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or discussion on this? I'm not sure the appropriate staff member that I would direct this question to, but Councillor Crone brought up the historical decision on Habitat for Humanity in 2015. That decision to do that, did it have a motion that spoke to all charities, all service groups, or was everything handled in a one-off? Mr. Marshall?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was a one-time, one-off request that was approved by council.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about the way that this, the motion reads, because it is directing staff and it is wide in its approach. And I'm listening to Councillor Roy DiClemente's comments about kind of blowing the doors wide open on things, and I find myself reflecting on the fact that one, I think that we should be doing something for the service group. I am concerned that from a fees perspective, a reduction in fees would prove challenging with the bylaw. So I am fully supportive of an extension, but I think I just want to do it for the Masonic Lodge. And if we get these requests every 9 years, then I'm happy to tackle that and I'm happy to defend my position. But I'm just concerned that if we do this motion, staff are now sitting with a resolution that is everyone that is listed in that resolution. So I would be happy if the mover of the motion would entertain it, that it was specifically for the Masonic Lodge. I would be supportive of that. It's not saying that I wouldn't if that didn't, I'm not saying I wouldn't support it as a whole if that's what it took to get council to support this with the motion as it's read, but I feel like there's an opportunity to tighten it up while we're still protecting the municipality and the staff in the way that is maybe best possible. So Councillor Roy DiClemente had her hand up.
Thank you. These are public dollars that the municipality is owed for services rendered. And we have an obligation, if we're talking about public dollars, to have some sort of mechanism for financial accountability. And organizations that are not registered charities, not registered not-for-profits, that don't have that financial, we just dealt with our own audit, that don't have that financial reporting or accountability for us to be able to ensure that we are engaging with the right organizations and dealing so with public dollars that are owed to the municipality. I think it's not an appropriate move for us to make at this time.
So I'll respond to, I've got my chair hat on, but I will just respond to that. That is why I'm specifically saying I don't think that a fee reduction is appropriate. And further, the fact that it would be a deferral feels appropriate to me. Not looking to rip the rules wide open and say it for everybody. This is a one-off, and I did specifically ask the question to our chief building officer to publicly state what our operating reserves are within the building department. That $16 million reserve for operating, that's not counting what our operating budget is, that's a reserve operating. When we're talking about the respect for tax dollars and ensuring the public purses is protected, I don't think that a decision of this to have somebody defer a payment would be challenged to the municipality in any way based on the answer to my question. So, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. I've got the report from staff on the Habitat to Humanity. So they were building a single home and wanted to defer the charges until they sold that home. So I think it's a little bit of a different situation for that. But even with this, it came with a 6-page staff report that laid out a number of options. And I think that doing this as a one-off isn't really the way this should be dealt with. I think it's got to go back to staff and think about the implications are. I'm concerned that they're not a not-for-profit. And I know that they are doing a lot of good work in the community, and that's to be applauded, but that's not really how we're making decisions when it comes to finances around here about what good works people are doing. So I think I would like to see staff report back on a deferral. They've said that the report that we have before us says that there's nothing currently on the books to be able to do that, but we were able to look at something similar for Habitat to Humanity. I think that having a report back from staff on something similar would be appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I think this is an opportunity, and I made a suggestion before to reduce the fees, and that was not entertained at the table here, and I respect that. And so a compromise seems to have been put forward to defer the fees. They still have to pay the fees. They're just given time to pay them in a reasonable fashion, which I think is an excellent compromise.
So there was a motion made with an amendment by the person who moved it. I would like to see if the person who moved it would entertain my amendment to make it specific for the Masonic Lodge. If that fails, then perhaps the mover wants to table as a more wide open, but I'd like to hear my council colleagues' thoughts on that. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to treat this as a one-off for the Masonic Lodge in Queensville, and then happy to support us looking into this deeper for future. But I think we need to get on with this. These people have been waiting for a while. I do have a question, though, for Mr. Marshall, though, with respect to financial statements. Did we ever request financial statements, audited statements from Habitat for Humanity?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I wasn't here when that took place, but I'm assuming that we would have checked to see that they were a registered charity and would have had their registration number, so that would have sufficed in accordance with the report, since we were providing a deferral because we're a nonprofit.
You assume we would have?
Yes.
Okay. It's not a certainty, though. I think, you know, we can get hung up on whether we want to only deal with charities or not-for-profits and non-profit. This is a one-off. We're really belaboring this.
So if the amendment has been made, sorry, I don't know if what you say, I'm farsighted and nearsighted. I can't read that. Let me pull it up in front of me here. Thanks. So the changes that council directs, sorry, I'll read the whole thing. Be it resolved that the finance memorandum dated June 25th, 2024, entitled Potential Fee Relief, Sharon Masonic Lodge, be received, and that council directs staff to offer a deferral not to exceed 10 years for application and DC fees for the Masonic Lodge. these municipal fees paid over the deferral period. Can I get a point of clarification, Mr. Clerk? If I call the vote on this, if the vote fails, is there an opportunity to entertain another motion on this?
Mr. Chair, certainly if it's a new vote, it wouldn't just be, you can't vote on the same item over and over again, but you could try a different motion.
Okay, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. As we had done in the past, if we're comparing this to Habitat for Humanity, I would like the same sort of report from staff where they can look into this. I think deferring these fees with just a simple direction from council is premature. With the, like I said, with Habitat for Humanity, we had a staff report that laid out very clearly what the terms were, what the implications were. And so I would like, rather than this saying that we direct staff to offer a deferral, that we ask staff to report back on a deferral.
So that would be, Councillor Crone, would you wish to entertain that amendment? You do not. Okay, so call the vote. All those in favor?
Sorry, I had an amendment on the floor.
Mr. Clerk, could I get clarification on the logistics of addressing it properly to ensure everybody's got their...
Sure. So typically, this council operates on a sort of friendly amendment, but for Councillor Carruthers, she could certainly bring an amendment to the main motion, which is before you here. And so it would be up to the chair to decide if that amendment would, contradict the main motion, or if it is a proper amendment.
So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to call the vote without the amendment. If the vote fails, then happy to have the discussion again.
Point of clarity to the clerk, if I have an amendment, it needs to be voted on, correct?
Mr. Chair, certainly the procedure bylaw allows for a motion to amend, so that would precede the voting on the main motion.
So we're going to vote on the amendment prior to voting on the motion. Okay, so all those do we need to document that one, or? Mr. Clerk, I will defer to your, to have a discussion with Councillor Carruthers to document the amendment appropriately.
Just a moment, Mr. Chair. I think maybe it's best if I just type something out, and I'll just work with council on the wording.
So I'm looking at just changing the beginning that council direct staff to report back on a potential deferral, and then the rest of it as is. So rather than just directing staff to offer, we're directing staff to report back on the deferral. And that way we'll have all the information before us, as we did with Habitat for Humanity. So it's making sure that we're being consistent, making sure we have all the information before us. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Discussion to the, if we could keep it to the amendment portion. Councillor Leahy, if possible, thanks.
Thank you very much. Well, it's with regard to the amendment, because there has been repeated reference to the Habitat for Humanity. And I think that the whole debate around this amendment speaks to a broader issue where we do not have a policy in place that makes it clear which charities or which organizations are deemed worthy, in a sense, of receiving any kind of deferral. And the bigger picture here that we need to keep in mind is about the opportunity to make an exception in an appropriate circumstance. And with regard to other organizations, we do provide public taxpayer dollars, has been provided to other organizations that are actually in other municipalities. And I'm thinking specifically the Feral Cat Rescue in Georgina. And I'm thinking of referring to other charities and organizations that we have made donations to as a town on behalf of all of council without any discussion at council. And I don't even know the amount that was donated to a particular organization. So there are other issues that may come out of this debate that we would like to address in the future. But with regard to the amendment that's put forward now, I do not agree with the amendment, and I believe we should move on to the vote.
So-
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Leahy. So we're going to call the vote on the amendment first. So all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? That carries. So that moves us to the motion that's on the floor, that council directs staff to offer a deferral not to exceed 10 years for application and DC for fees for the Sharon Masonic Lodge. These municipal fees will be paid over the deferral period. All those, sorry, any discussion on that item? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we're still under, thanks, everyone. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, might I request that, being the time of the year and that we're not going to come back until the end of July, could we have this ratified at council tonight? I would ask.
Are you moving that motion?
I am making that motion, yes, thank you.
Okay, any discussion on that? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
We have business people who have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for our hospital, who have done amazing work out of their own volition and have donated money visibly, big, huge checks to our hospital. And if those individuals came in here and said, I do great work in the community and I've purchased this property and I want to relocate my business into this property, will you waive my fees? I have a feeling we would have to say no. And this is the same sort of circumstance, in my opinion. And it is inappropriate in my mind for us to be offering that deferral. I obviously voted and spoken that way. And I have
Point
felt
of order
very
through you,
strongly
Mr. Chair.
that the motion on the table is whether we ratify it at the same day or not. And I have spoken openly about how important that opportunity for sober second thought is. And so I feel strongly that a decision of this import that was not a unanimous decision, that isn't as time sensitive as it might be, that it should not be ratified. And so I'm speaking to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have, so Councillor Leahy and then Councillor Carruthers on Councillor Crone's motion?
I believe we've already voted on that. And in multiple previous votes, it has not been unanimous. So I believe that if we don't ratify it today and allow them to proceed with the vote as we have cast it, it could possibly have the perception of being punitive to create further delays before the implementation of the vote.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. So we're speaking about just the ratification now, and it is our practice to ratify at the next meeting. We already have two other things in finance that we're pushing forward. It is our collected understanding that we want sober second thought. It's what we voted to uphold, and in rare circumstances, we need to ratify same day when there is a timeline, such as, that's why I asked Mr. Marshall to clarify why we were ratifying the drafted, the audited financial statements same day. So there is clear rationale on legislative responsibilities, why we need to do that. This is the third thing under finance that we were asking to ratify today, and I just think that we need to just stick with what our procedure is in all cases that we can, and not ratify same day if it's not absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Do any other members of committee wish to speak prior to Councillor Leahy? Councillor Leahy, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. There are copious examples of exceptions being made when we ratify a vote on the same day at the council meeting. It's very efficient in terms of doing business, and we don't want to be selectively using this sober second thought strategy that has been presented. I don't understand what the use of that is, unless they think that there is some possibility a couple of months from now that we are going to somehow reverse the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Leahy. Councillor Crothers?
Thank you. Just to help you understand our procedural bylaw, we ratify at the next meeting. That is our procedural bylaw. If we want to make an exception to that, we can make an exception. So that's what we're talking about, is how many exceptions do we make? So I think you kind of got that backwards, that the exception is the sober second thought. No, that is our procedure. Our procedure is everything goes to the next meeting, and we ratify at the next meeting. We always have that at the top of our agenda for the next council meeting. So this is an exception, and when we have exceptions, there is strong rationale as to why we have those exceptions, such as I brought up the audited financial statement. There's a legislative responsibility that we must do it within 6 months. So that I am voting that we stick with the procedural bylaw that this council has agreed to.
Councillor Crone?
Normally, Councillor Crothers is correct. We normally wait for the next meeting. Unfortunately for us, the next meeting is until the end of July. And so this is, if it was every 2 weeks, yes, I would be happy to be patient, but we're talking about an extra 2 weeks. This is a month. I don't think this is a big request. I will be supporting, obviously, because I moved it.
If there's any further discussion, no further discussion, what I'll do is I will call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Marshall, do you have any other items that you have to speak to for committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not at this time.
Thank you, sir. Members of committee, do you have any items, questions for Mr. Marshall? Seeing none, I will turn the chair back over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at our agenda here, and I believe our corporate services are the next that we have, and I would turn it over to Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 4 items on the agenda today under corporate services. The first one is a presentation report on our asset management plan, and I will turn it over to Ms. Gandhi to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of Council. I'm pleased to present the 2024 Asset Management Plan to Council. Before I proceed, it's important to acknowledge that this plan was a collaborative effort involving colleagues in Engineering and Public Works, Fire and Emergency Services, Parks, Recreation and Culture, Finance and Information Technology, and a steering committee comprised of general managers in these areas. I would also like to acknowledge the support of Kirsten Dack and Stephanie Roll, who provided dedicated project support for this plan. With input from these teams, PSD Citywide drafted the plan, and we have with us online Sarah Craig from PSD, who will be able to take questions later if there are any. Over the next several minutes, I'll be presenting the regulatory context, highlights of the asset management plan, and I'll invite questions from Council. As part of this agenda package, members of Council will have received the staff report that accompanies the asset management plan, as well as the strategic asset management policy update. I'll start off by saying that asset management is a matter that all levels of government, including the 444 Ontario municipalities, are facing. With that in mind, in 2015, the provincial government passed Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, which regulates the form and content of municipal asset management plans. An interesting fact, when introduced in 2014, the bill was initially proposed to apply only to provincial institutions' infrastructure planning. However, the bill was later amended to require municipal governments to have an asset management plan in place. The regulations for asset management plans are stipulated in Ontario Regulation 588 2025-17. The asset management plan and policy, which require council approval, are also required for certain provincial funding streams. The plans required are expected to increase in complexity each year. In 2022, East Gwillimbury Asset Management Plan addressed the state of infrastructure, current levels of service, and life cycle costs for core assets such as roads, bridges, and water and wastewater infrastructure. This year, the plan addresses those elements for both core and non-core assets, such as vehicles, facilities, and machinery and equipment. In 2025, the asset management plan will expand to include a financial strategy as well as proposed levels of service and the costs associated with those that levels of service. The international standards definition of levels of service is provided in the asset management plan, but for the purpose of today's presentation, I'll simply say that levels of service are the expected outcomes customers expect and that assets provide. For example, residents expect clean drinking water. The assets that deliver drinking water require specific service targets to successfully do so, and this includes thresholds for maintenance, backup systems, and assessments of the pipes. Another example is that residents expect to use town facilities that are in good working order. To make that happen, we have a responsibility to make sure that the walls, the foundation, the roof, the HVAC system have a maintenance schedule and perform to the standards our residents expect. I'll also draw to your attention to almost any day where there's a headline indicating that a piece of critical infrastructure is failing, and those are around us all the time. As I noted earlier, the 2024 Asset Management Plan addresses both core and non-core assets. It provides the value and condition of those assets as of December 31st, 2022, and that's an important fact, and that's at a specific point in time. This is important to note because as I talk about the condition of those assets, it's possible that some of those assets may already be repaired, replaced, or out of service as of today's date. Still, the information from the asset management plan tells us about which assets require priority funding through municipal revenue sources and or through provincial or federal grants. I'll now turn to the details of the 2024 asset management plan. The current replacement costs of all core and non-core assets. I just want to make sure we're on the right slide. Yes. I think we can go to the next one. Yes, there we go. I'll now turn to the details of the 2024 Asset Management Plan. The current replacement costs of all core and non-core assets total $2.24 billion, and by current, I mean 2022 dollars. Core assets comprise 89% of that amount, with non-core assets, such as vehicles, machinery, and equipment, comprising the remaining 11%. In addition to the value of core and non-core assets as of December 31st, 2022, the AMP reflects the condition of those assets on that date. Next slide, please. Based on a number of assessment tools, which I'll discuss in a moment, 93% of those assets are in fair or better condition. Asset condition is determined in a number of ways. So there is staff or third-party inspections using eyes on the asset, desktop audits using technologies such as CCTV video, which we use in our pipes, and age with estimated useful life. What we are working towards is a process whereby any changes to an asset will align with the condition of that asset, and that this information will reside in the same database so that there is one source of truth. Assessing the condition of assets is not new. In many instances, we're required to inspect assets for safety. This includes vehicles, playgrounds, roads, bridges, water and wastewater systems. I'll now turn to a few slides that tell the story of the growth of our assets and future capital assets. Next slide, please. Next one, please. There we go. First, the history. This graph is a fabulous reflection of how asset growth mirrors population growth, which is indicated by the red line on this chart. Between 2016 and 2021, EG's population grew by 44%. That's exactly where there's significant growth for our water, road, wastewater, and stormwater systems, all of which are needed to service the people who live and work here. Looking ahead, our calculations. Next slide, please. Our calculations indicate that from 2023 to 2032, an average of $18 million per year is required to replace core and non-core assets. If we extend the timeline further to 2051, an average, next slide, please. An average of $32.1 million is required per year to replace core and non-core assets. On this slide and in the asset management plan, I also want to point out the term backlog. This is an industry term and represents the cost of replacing assets still in use beyond their assigned useful life. The term might give the impression that we're behind in replacing assets. That's certainly the impression I had initially. However, it is common to not replace an asset exactly at the time its useful life is expected to end. A vehicle is probably a really good example of that. With proper maintenance and if mileage is low, we can extend the life of a vehicle for many years beyond its expected life. I'm going to turn our attention towards the future. Next slide, please. I want to reiterate that the AMP reflects the 2022 core and non-core assets. That means as we grow, additional assets will be required and will be added to the inventory, and it's expected that the replacement value of infrastructure will more than double by 2051. Next slide, please. As this infrastructure grows, we'll also need to consider future levels of service which reflect the performance of the assets, the cost, and any risks. In short, we have quite a bit of work to do. As I noted earlier, the 2025 AMP will build on the AMP we're presenting today and will include financial strategy, where proposed levels of service will be explored. Next slide, please. As the AMP shows, and as I've described today, we fully expect that there will continue to be a shortfall between the funding needed to repair and replace core and non-core assets and the funds we have. I'll speak to that funding shortly. The financial strategy is expected to move us in the direction we need to go. And that said, it's important to stress that we're also not alone. There's a challenge in Canada in all levels of government, and this is probably not just Canada-wide, it's globally too. And the condition of assets, the condition of the assets is one way for us to determine how we prioritize funding and set aside funds to replace or repair those assets. Comparatively, this chart is indicating this. EJ has a relatively small percentage of assets in poor or worse condition, and that's because we're a growing municipality and much of our infrastructure is relatively new. The next slide speaks to the funding challenges, which, as I mentioned, we're not alone. Most municipalities are underinvesting in infrastructure programs, as this chart indicates. We will, next slide, please. We will include a financial strategy in the 2025 AMP with the objective of reaching a sustainable level of funding based on the proposed levels of service. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? With Council's approval, we will submit the 2024 AMP to the province. We'll also focus our attention on ensuring core and non-core assets are centralized and integrated, the data from those assets, so that we have one source of truth. The asset management, next slide, please. The asset management program is not a one-time activity. In addition to making sure information about the assets is integrated, which on its own is a huge undertaking, we will begin to develop the 2025 AMP, which will encompass the proposed levels of service and the financial strategy. All of this work requires extensive collaboration with all departments and support from PSD. This journey will need appropriate in-house subject matter expertise as well and leadership, and the resourcing component of that will be brought to Council through the 2025 budget process. I welcome questions from Council.
Thank you very much, and I wanted to thank you for all the work that you've put into this. I know it was a very big ball of yarn to untangle, and it's going to be very helpful for us as we move into budget to have a better handle on what's happening with asset management. And I really appreciate the one source of the truth, because I think that's something that we need to all be on the same page, understand what we're dealing with this. I would ask if the clerk could put up the resolutions. We have a 4-part resolution before us to receive the report, to approve the asset management plan, to approve the strategic asset management policy updates, and directing staff to circulate the report to the Ministry of Infrastructure and post it on the town's website. So those are up there. Can I have someone to move those recommendations? Councillor Johns, and is there any questions? Councillor Johns.
I just have a few comments, Councillor Carruthers. First, I want to lead with, I was so pleased that Ms. Gandhi, that I saw you taking the lead on this. I think that the municipality, the opportunity to be able to have someone like yourself, who I see as a builder, and be able to set our municipality up by kind of taking a step back and looking at asset management from your perspective, and then I guess what I'm trying to get at is that this is going to turn into a staffed plan as opposed to specifically residing in the department. And I think that having you taking the lead on asset management for this initial stage on getting the baton up and running, as I was very pleased on that. The the comments, we just came out of the finance section, and we were talking about how our financial statements, or our audited financial statements, are based upon the book value of the assets within the statements. And then when we come here, we talk about replacement costs. So I do have a couple questions. The first one is that the replacement costs, as clarified as of today, are those replacement costs built upon as of today at book value, or are they actually as of today what market cost would be for replacement?
I'm going to direct that question to the treasurer.
Through you, Madam Chair. It would be the cost that it would take to buy it today. So it's not the book value.
It's not based on the financial statement?
No, it's
Wonderful.
based on
Thank you.
what you need today.
Wonderful. Madam Chair, if I could, if you go to slide, Mr. Clerk, if you wouldn't mind going to the asset condition slide. I just wanted to call something out that I think that, like Ms. Gandhi called out a Canadian problem or a North American problem. Like our infrastructure, we see what's going on in Calgary, and the importance of paying attention to where we are. Like, we are a small municipality with an operating budget of 32 million. Now, when I looked at this slide and I saw the graphs, I was first off thinking that it was relative. But each line is not relative in dollars. Like, I'll call out the roads network, $35 million on very poor. Now, that could be based on road life. I'm not sure if that is based on actually looking. But then you see the line below it on bridges and culverts, 1.9 million, and then you'll see machinery and equipment, 925,000. So I just wanted to raise the flag for this committee as we're going forward in the budget process. When we have an operating budget of 32 million as a municipality, and in 10 years there are concerns about very poor at 35 million as of today. The report talks about 18.8 million. I would challenge that it's actually higher than that. The fact is, we also have a deficit sitting in our roads budget of that the council determined during budget that we wanted to make sure that we were showing transparency, and we are in the hole by 4 million in that line item. And I think that as we are looking at these numbers, and I think as we are thinking about our budget and thinking about what it costs today versus what it could be 10 years out, I want to wave the dramatic flag because this really is the generational challenge for this council. I believe this is the generational challenge for this council, and I think that I think the reality is that we can't stick our head in the sand in it. We need to stand up and own it and recognize that we're going to have to eat this elephant in small bites. Hopefully that there's going to be a provincial and federal government that helps out with it, because it is a national problem. And I think that just about wraps up everything that I wanted to say. Oh, the call out on the deficit. So again, if we're 4 million in the hole on roads, but we have the money sitting in general, but if we're 4 million on the debt on the roads, and we do believe that 18.8 million, staff could have provided a lower number, but 18.8 was the number, so I'm assuming that's the lowest of the low. That puts us around 23 million. Our operating budget is 32 million. You can't raise money off of DCs. It comes from operating. And this whole entire plan is to take us to zero. It doesn't take us to a surplus. It takes us to zero of what we need. So if we delivered everything that was required, we'd still be at zero. So I think that's everything I wanted to say, because I wanted to say it out loud here now, because as we go through our budget deliberations, I really do believe that this is the generational challenge of this council and this country, especially what we see going on in Calgary, that while we are better than other municipalities, we still have a lot of work to do. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johns. I think you raised some good points. If we look at the historical installation of infrastructure, we're seeing that a huge percentage of it is coming from 2012 to 2021. So we're very lucky that we don't have the aging infrastructure of some municipalities, and we have some time to get our fiscal house in order to make sure that we can repair these things that are fairly new by the time they reach end of life. So I think you bring up some very good points. And just for clarification, this is a snapshot from December 2022, because that's what the legislation asks us for. And on the chart that was up there, for instance, under vehicles, we have a 4.8 million in very poor condition. That's because we were replacing a fire truck. So if that was done today, those numbers would be slightly different, but you have to take a snapshot from some point in time. I had the same comment about that bar graph too, asking if we could do that in a different way to have a little more reflective. Other comments? I don't see any. One other comment on this is how important this work is, because when we come to budget, a lot of us are talking about the things that we can see, that our residents reach out to us, that the tennis court needs repaving, playground equipment needs replacing, and meanwhile, under the ground, we could have what Calgary went through. And so we have to rely on this to tell us where we need to be investing, because it's not always the stuff that we can see. So thank you for that, and no further questions. I will call the vote on the resolutions that are before us. It's a four-parter: to receive, to approve the asset management plan, to approve the strategic asset management policy updates, and directing staff to circulate the report to the Ministry of Infrastructure and to post on the town's website. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 2 of 4 under corporate services, and that is the council compensation review. Ms. Gandhi?
Yes, so I just move the mic over. I'm changing hats. So in front of you, the staff prepared a report to council, the staff report to council with regards to the council compensation review. We are not making any recommendations as of today. We're simply seeking a council direction to conduct a review, which has not been done in some time, and also to align, because we're in the process of doing a full-time compensation review, so we have experts available to give us a hand right now. And also we're recommending that we develop a council compensation policy which would determine the frequency at which these types of reviews would be conducted, and any other compensation related matters, and then it would be informed by that, as opposed to not having that sort of structure associated with council compensation discussion. So we have here today our Director of People and Belonging, Dahlia Demrath, and she's able to take any questions, or I can do so as well.
Thank you very much. So before us, we have a 3-part resolution. The first is to receive. The second is that we direct staff to do a council compensation review at the same time that the staff market compensation reviews taking place, and that we direct staff to develop a policy on the structure and recurring council compensation process and report back. So we are just directing staff basically to get more information at this point with this 3-part resolution. Can I have someone move that resolution? Councillor Leahy. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We have 2 more reports. The next one is our corporate services memo on communications and engagement. Ms. Gandhi.
Staff prepared a memo to council with regards to a communication survey that was conducted between March 28th and May 5th. the results of which are summarized in the report that's before you, including the specific questions that were posed. And so we are open to any questions that council may have. With regards to the report, our Director of Communications and Customer Service, Bethany Lee, is here as well to take any questions.
Thank you very much. The motion before us is to receive the report. Can I have someone move that? Councillor Crone, are there any questions? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. I would like to hear from Ms. Lee about the structure, the form that this communications and engagement took for the benefit of the public record and residents of East Gwillimbury, so they understand fully what the results reflect. Thank you.
So through the chair, thank you very much for the question. If I understand correctly, you just would like a little bit of a walkthrough in the background on the survey. Great, I'm happy to provide that. So first, I'd just like to recognize Director Laura Hanna, who initiated the survey, along with the team who's here today, Danielle Malzer, Rachel Thompson, and Sarah LaBelle. So just giving a nod to their work. The survey ran from March 28th to May 5th, and there was 13 questions. Overall, the questions each received around 200 responses on average. So some folks chose to not answer some, and some did answer all questions. The previous survey was in around 2018. And so this was an update that was important for us to gather both post-pandemic. Our channels have expanded, and as well, the changes in some print media have taken place. So the focus was to hear from residents and understand, were we meeting their needs, and are there areas for improvement? So through this information, we've themed the responses, and we have some excellent work to do ahead. We have some great recommendations, and they fall into themed areas which are within the memo. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. In terms of distribution, so this was a digital survey that in terms of the focus. However, there were paper copies, and there were a number of paper support, advertisements, door hangers, and so on, postering at the libraries, et cetera. So while this was a digital survey, there were opportunities, and as an example, our customer service desk had paper versions that people could fill out throughout the survey time. And I'm happy to answer any detailed questions you might have or thoughts about the future.
Thank you. Councillor Leahy, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. I had a question when I first saw this about, was it all digital? So thank you for clarifying that. And the response I got, there's about 17 or 18 different ways that they reached out. So very happy with that. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Councillor. Awesome, thanks. When I would, sorry, I'll start by asking a question. How many mailers do we do from the municipality per year? I'm not talking about advertisements, but specifically a mailer to somebody's house.
Through the chair to Councillor Johns, do you mean for development, like notifications? Is that the type of thing you're asking?
Sure. I guess what I'll do is I thought I could ask that. And so the frame of my question is that when I saw the survey results, I felt like the survey results aligned with acknowledging, like the question of where are you getting your information? I felt like the responses aligned with what we were currently doing. And so it wasn't like we are doing X amount of social media, and that was like over and above, like for exponentially. I felt like everything in the responses were kind of aligned with what we were doing. And I guess when I was looking at it, I was thinking, if we aren't doing any direct mailers to people's homes, and they're getting it through print media, like how do you review that survey and determine what the better outcomes are when you don't see a kind of differential when you overlay the two factors of what we're doing versus what you're seeing that people are getting their sources of information? Like, what are we going to do differently? Because it seems that the responses were very mirrored to what we're already doing. That was the long question of trying to figure out, what are you going to do with this? Because
Right.
it looks pretty plain to me that
Good.
there wasn't clear direction.
So through the chair to Councillor Johns, I think your comments are aligned with what we did see. So we did see a lot of validation around the channels, and that they're working. However, when we go into some of the commentary, we see that there are areas for improvement. We have, some residents who would like more information around events, more information around seniors, and reaching out to them directly through paper postering or, supports that suit them. We also saw some questions around language use and are there plans for the town to look at translation? And there are plans. So while it aligns with where we are today, we see those little moments and those little pieces of advice from the community, and we take that seriously, and it gives us energy to adjust and to grow. Is that getting at your question?
Kind of. I think that you're talking about the content and I'm talking about the logistics. Like, logistically, do you think that as a result of this survey that you're going to do anything differently logistically, or do you think that it's the content in which you're delivering in those kind of pipelines?
Thank you. I think that we will do things slightly differently logistically. One of the really interesting findings in my mind was the use of road signs came up very high. The larger road signs, the variable road signs. We have a great opportunity there. They're highly effective based on what we're hearing from the community, and they're also very cost effective. And we can move those around and go across our footprint. So there's an example. And if we sort of go into the data piece by piece, there are examples like that where I do think logistically, if we call it logistically or tactically, we'll see some changes and improvements, and I'm happy to work on that with the team.
Thank you. And further to that, one of the things that jumped out at me, it was the 6,800 Facebook followers, but only 1,800 newsletter subscribers. So converting some of those Facebook subscribers to our newsletter, it would be really important. And one of my comments when I was talking with Ms. Gandhi about this was that I do like when I'm talking to residents about the e-newsletter to say, if you sign up for the newsletter, you only get the newsletter. That you get it once a week. We're not going to, inundate you with tons of emails about things. So I'm thinking that maybe we need a secondary thing where we can really pump stuff out, but keep the newsletter as just the newsletter, because I think we'll get, it's a good proposition for people to know they're only going to get once a week, but maybe there's people who want more than once a week. So. Councillor Roy DeClemente, and then Councillor Crum.
Thank you. I think what I'll do is I'll try and paraphrase what Councillor Johns was saying, and I think it was simply that my instinct was, when I was reading this, was at its most fundamental, we asked people who use Facebook if they like to use Facebook to get information about the town. And so it was very sort of self-referential and didn't capture those areas that we don't know about, because we were asking those people as a captive audience. And so for me, it reinforces that, yes, that's working, but I feel that there are segments of our community who aren't on traditional social media, who aren't on English language social media, they're on other languages. And so I think that there are ways for us to be able to share that information. And for me, it's very much that newsletter. There's a great deal of effort that goes into that weekly newsletter. Maybe it's a quick way of, maybe it's translating it into another language and also sharing that with our community. So I think we just need to be more creative in how we're reaching out. And then I also, the Quebec signs, absolutely, those are some low-hanging fruit for us. I wonder whether it might make sense for us to invest in our own rather than subcontracting out, and that's something I'm sure that you'll explore as you kind of delve into, that that's a good method. So how else can you engage in a cost-effective way? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I I actually had the same thought as Councillor Roy DeClemente. I think there's an opportunity for us to get into that market. But I take you back to the deputation we had the first thing today about that big billboard. Not that I'm suggesting we go out and invest in billboards, but every town property has a digital sign, which I'm not sure we're being well served by them. I think they look like they're a relic from the 70s. I really don't. The message is too slow when it scrolls for me to read it. Anyways, maybe I'm a slow reader, but I wonder if there's. I know I am. I think there's an opportunity for us to invest in some better electronic signs for the Civic Center, for the sports complex, libraries, et cetera. Has that factored into any of your thoughts or discussions?
Yes. So through the chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. We actually are expanding the digital signage program. So with the Health and Active Living Plaza coming online next year, we have plans for digital signage there, and that will vastly improve the look and feel of town signage. As well, across the capital projects, we have other signs that are coming on board. You would notice in Town Hall here, and at the desk, across our facilities, we're now installing digital screens that are inside the footprint. And this is, again, extremely cost effective. It's nimble. We can change it on the dime. We have the full control of this signage, and so it's very effective. So thank you for the question. It is on our radar. We'll continue to grow that effectively.
Thank you. Maybe we know a good supplier, hey? I just want to follow up on Councillor Roy DeClemente's comment about we surveyed Facebook users and they get their information from Facebook, which was almost exactly what I said. When I spoke with Ms. Gandhi about this, and she sent me a list of all the ways they reached out, and it's quite extensive. There's like 17, 18 different ways. And I would ask that you share that list with all of council because it certainly wasn't just people on Facebook. We reached out in so many different ways, and very, very happy to see that. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll throw this one out. We talk about roadside signs and those type of things. I don't know how many of our staff will be happy with me throwing this out there, but we have mobile billboards driving around this town thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers weekly. Why don't we throw some signage on some of our vehicles? Whether they be cheap vinyl signs that can go on for a week or two and come back off. I'm thinking about those Sprinter vans that are basically a billboard, the side of them when you drive down the road. Maybe staff may not be happy driving around with an advertisement on the side of the truck, but it's there waiting for us to do.
Excellent idea. Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Nope. Seeing none, we have Councillor Crone has moved that we receive the report. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We have one last report on brand guidelines update.
Yes, and our Director Lee is standing at the podium to provide a little bit more of an update on that particular item. So the brand guidelines were originally developed a number of years ago when we changed our logo, and it's a responsible thing to do to take a look at the brand guidelines on a regular basis, and that's what this report memorandum to Council provides. And Director Lee is here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, and I'm happy to see we still have the coat of arms in there and very clear about when we use the coat of arms. So I know that was a big question when we first looked at the logo, so that's very good. Can I get someone to move receipt of the brand guidelines update? Councillor Crone, any questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was a couple of things that I felt that were perhaps missing or overlooked in some of this, and one being that we have, I would argue that we have two sub-brands that aren't included in this, and one being the CPRC Active by Nature sub-brand. as well as our Team EG sub-brand. And I know those have sort of, especially the Team EG one, has sort of emerged organically over the years. It was coined when we started doing the Run for South Lake, but it's now become sort of an HR join Team EG. We're recruiting kind of an approach, and I think it would be mindful for us to have a look, perhaps at the next update, to look at how we're using how other departments are using their branding and making sure that it's connected in with the rest of our brand, and whether that's Team EG still using our brand and adding to it, or whether it's a separate thing. I think that those are two things that are important for us that we're seeing used quite often. And then there was also, I know we talked during our strategic plan discussions about our town, our future, and getting rid of that. This document seems to suggest that a great place to be has also emerged, and I might resist that heavily as far as how we want to be including that language in our branding. I don't think that we haven't discussed it as a council, and I don't think I think it's been put in there as a reflexive motion, rather than something that's strategic and mindful that we want to have as our tagline, if we even want a tagline whatsoever, which I might argue we don't. I think we're good with EG and the brand that we have because it's outstanding. But I just wanted to sort of make those comments here. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Good comments. Anyone else? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive moved by Councillor Crone. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And that's the end of corporate services. I turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are at item J, and I'm just wondering if people sitting here would like to get up and stretch and take a few moments, 10 minutes to and come back perhaps at 4:30-ish.
That's good.
Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. We are now at item J, Parks, Recreation, and Culture, with Councillor Crone in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have two items up on the agenda today. The first one is Parks and Recreation Culture Report, Health and Active Living Plaza Food Services. Could I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Johns, okay. Thank you. Mr. Karmazin, can you bring us up to speed on this, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The town has made best efforts to secure a healthy food service option for the Health and Active Living Plaza with two separate requests for proposal processes. The town has not received a response to these processes, and as per the procurement bylaw and procedures, staff have negotiated a terms of reference and a contract with a reputable and professional healthy food services provider. The report prepared for council recommends a contract award to prepare for operations with the completion of the Health and Active Living Plaza project. This is an ancillary service that does provide a convenience to our residents and visitors at the center and will generate revenue to offset operating costs. We'd be happy to answer any questions related to the recommended reward of contract.
Thank you, Mr. Karmazin. Do we have any questions from committee? Councillor Carruthers.
Can we get them to cater all of our council meetings?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll certainly look at that as an option.
Any other questions? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you. Not so much a question as a congratulations to Mr. Karmazin. I know when we were envisioning this facility, we wanted to get away from the slush puppy and hot dogs that have been rolling for 6 hours on a heater. And so I think that this actually delivers very much on that vision that we've had on healthy eating and providing good options for our athletes and community members. So I just wanted to commend him on the selection. I had some fun browsing the menu. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so before us, it is be it resolved Parks and Recreation Culture Report, PRC 2024-07, dated June 25th, 2024, entitled Health and Active Living Plaza Food Services be received, and that council authorizes the general manager of Parks, Recreation and Culture to negotiate and execute a lease agreement with Z Eats at the Health and Active Living Plaza to the satisfaction of the town solicitor. All those in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. All right, the second item on our agenda is the Parks and Recreation and Culture Report, Health and Active Living Plaza Fitness. Mr. Karmazin, can you take us through that, please?
Thank you. Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, staff provided an update to council on the request for proposal process for fitness services at the Health and Active Living Plaza. The fitness industry is a very competitive and specialized industry. The report prepared for council presents an option to assist the town and its staff with negotiation of a potential fitness services contract, including a very specific scope of work and a not to exceed budgetary limit with that scope of work. Be happy to answer any questions related to the background, context, or recommended course of action for these next steps.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have asked for a mover for this. Councillor Carruthers, did you want to move that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Carruthers, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm glad that you've been able to find someone to help with this. I know that it's been a struggle. It's gone out a few times, so I'm happy to see this before us. I was a member of Persicini's back in the day, and he certainly knows what he's doing when it comes to running a fitness service. So I think this is very good. Thank you.
Councillor Leahy, you have a question.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I have a question because of my understanding that there have been 2 RFPs put forward, and to which, if my understanding is correct, there was no one interested in pursuing this. And you mentioned that fitness is a very competitive and specialized industry. And so with that in mind, I'm I was going to consider that we think outside of the box, and then rather than engaging a former councillor to pursue this for us, that I suggest that I'd like to ask Mr. Karmazan if there are any other options for us to pursue in terms of moving forward that he might have in mind, or if we need to put it back to staff again to consider other options.
Mr. Karmazin?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with any report back to council, if the town is unsuccessful with the negotiation of a service contract, we can look at the potential option of a self-performed fitness operation. Many municipalities do offer a base level of fitness that does not compete with the private sector. It's more of a base level service that would provide strength and conditioning and cardio machines, but not necessarily have the higher level or enhanced services that a private sector gym operation would have. We've seen good examples in both Aurora and Newmarket where they've provided a municipally operated fitness operation, and it hasn't directly competed with the private sector in those markets. So that could be an option as well that we could present to council should we be unsuccessful with negotiating a service contract with a private sector provider.
Thank you very much. My follow-up would be,
Okay.
yes, is that if we have put out an RFP twice and had no responses, I'm thinking that that is sending us a message, a clear message about the possibilities for the future, and that we might consider pursuing, as other municipalities have successfully, with another option. So I'm considering making a friendly amendment to this. So.
Okay, why don't we get
Yeah.
can we get some other questions out of the way, and then
Yeah.
we'll see if something else pops up. Councillor Roy DiClemente, you had a question.
Thank you. Not so much a question as a comment. I think that given the challenges and the competitive marketplace, that it makes sense for us to contract with somebody who has 40 years of subject matter expertise in running these sorts of facilities to report to us what they recommend we should be doing moving forward. This is even is important even with respect to selecting an equipment supplier. One of our neighboring municipalities to the south opened a facility, purchased equipment, and now can't repair it because they can't get parts. And so that comes down to working with somebody who has the expertise to know who we should be doing business with in this area. So I have no problems supporting Mr. Karmazan's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Leahy, if I could just remind you to your microphone's on.
Sorry.
Councillor Johns.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Councillor Roy DiClemente said. Like, there was a comment at one side of the table about a former councillor. This is not a former councillor, yes, in public service for 2 terms, but then 4 decades, close to 5 decades, running a business, which means needing to turn a profit, working hard every day, knowing the subject matter, and the opportunity to be able to have a conversation with them, to enter into a service contract to help us, which, like, I'm jumping up and down, yes, please help us. It was a perfect example of what Councillor Roy DiClemente said, the example of making decisions, getting equipment, and then not getting repairs. This opportunity to have the business intelligence on our side, not even of question. I'm happy to support.
Any other questions before I go back to Councillor Leahy? Councillor Foster.
I'll just concur with what everybody said. To me, this decision is easy. We don't have the expertise that Mr. Percicini has, so why would we not entertain not taking advantage, but working with him to help us? It sounds pretty simple to me. Thank you.
I think we could take advantage, but anyway. Councillor Leahy, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. The intention, I will respectfully say through you, Mr. Chair, is not to personalize it. I did not refer to the councillor by name. I said former councillor. My concern is about the perception of a former councillor who voted on all matters to do with the Health and Active Living Plaza, that we would then be paying that individual to provide those services. And I believe that there's an opportunity to explore other options which have been successfully pursued in other municipalities. So that will be my final comment on it, and I will be voting no to this. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, Mr. Karmazin, do you have anything else for committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do have one very brief update with our event strategy. We have now contracted Expedition Consulting to lead our event strategy. Given our next meeting isn't until the end of July, I thought it would be beneficial to inform council that we'll be starting a public outreach process conducted over the summer and into the fall, where we'll be engaging with outreach to our committees of council, mayor and council, our community groups, staff, and the general public. We're going to be working very closely with communications to promote a survey as well as our engagement workshops. So I just thought I'd mention that to council and keep you fully informed in case you see some updates that the events strategy work will be commencing over the summer and into the fall months.
Could I have a mover for this verbal update, Councillor Foster? And does the committee have any questions for Mr. Karmazin? Seeing none, I will hand the chair back to you, Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon, I forgot to call the vote. All those in favor? Glad we did that. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
I'm here. We're now at Development Services with Councillor Roy DeClemente in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item on our prepared agenda, which is Development Services Report 2024-15 regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for Grandview Equestrian Farms, Inc. at 17743 McCowan Road. We have a motion that we receive the report and that we approve and enact the zoning bylaw amendment included as Appendix 7 to the report to rezone the land's Oak Ridges Moraine Core Zone to a site-specific Oak Ridges Moraine Core Zone, which would be ORMC-177. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Crone. Ms. Bégin, would you care to introduce the report, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to call on our senior planner, Mathieu Daou, to provide some context for the recommendation report, and he is available to answer any questions, as am I.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Daou.
It's on already. Perfect. Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief, but the staff report before you today recommends approval of zoning bylaw amendment seeking to rezone the subject lands from Oak Ridge Moraine Core, or MC, to site-specific Oak Ridge Moraine Core, or MC-177 on the property municipally known as 17743 McCowan Road. The applicant is seeking to establish an on-farm diversified use, namely a health and strength training facility within an existing barn on the subject lands. All in all, the application generally conforms to the provincial policy, official plan, and zoning bylaw. Following the public meeting, planning staff have worked with the applicant to decrease the area of operations to approximately 1 hectare of the farm and eliminating a number of site-specific requests, namely loading spaces and parking provisions. Lastly, planning staff note that the proposal is subject to site plan control, where the detailed design pieces will be reviewed, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. Members of committee, any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Crone. And then I think Councillor Leahy also would like to speak. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the report, through you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the report and your findings. I know this has been a challenging one from day one. I think the applicant was originally, when he came to the town, I think he was advised he could do it as a sort of a home-based business approach, and that was a way to get him started. But he was warned that if complaints did happen, we'd have to go through the full the full court press, and that's what's happened. So I appreciate it. It's been about 3 years that we've been, I think it was the previous term that we had this, so I appreciate hanging in there with this gentleman, and this couple. And I know council, and I certainly as the ward councillor, as I'm sure Councillor Leahy has received concerns from some of the neighbours. I think it needs to be said for the record that the neighbours have been incredibly reasonable in their approach and not asking for complete dismissal. They were willing to work with them. And so I spoke with the applicant today and suggesting that they need to be prepared to work with the neighbors and work with staff to make sure that noise concerns are addressed and that they don't have to view people working out in their backyards, and so that it's a very respectful, neighborly approach. So I'm sure you'll be working with the applicant more on the site plan. I know there's going to be some landscaping that's done that I hope will reinforce that privacy for the neighbor. And I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you for all your hard work in doing this, and continue to work with the applicant and the neighbor and make sure that we do have a very friendly neighborhood in that section of town. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Leahy, go ahead.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. Actually, Councillor Crone stole my thunder with regard to my lingering concern about noise issues that were raised by multiple residents. And so it's good to hear that the owners are open to working with the town and with their community to be respectful of that in moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've heard that some noise mitigation and some vegetation and sort of some work at the site plan level will help go a long way. If I may, we have still, council has received some correspondence about noise and looking to see, to ask about keeping the operation into the barn and not doing outdoor classes. Is there some comments that staff can provide about whether that's even feasible?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I note that as part of this process and in response to feedback that the applicants received, they did initiate a noise study and determine that what they're proposing is within acceptable limits. They are subject to the noise bylaw, as are all residents of the community. So I think they're certainly being conscious of that as they move forward with developing their operations.
So the noise bylaw applies here?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll have a mover from Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. That's the end of our prepared agenda. Ms. Bégin, do you have anything further to bring up at this time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Chair, if I may, given that again, it's going to be about a month before we meet again, can we have this ratified in council this evening?
Does staff have
if council would so indulge.
Do staff have any comment on that?
Perfect. Through you, Madam Chair, it's completely up to council on this item. As you can see in the staff report, the bylaw is prepared and ready for ratification, so ultimately up to council.
They still need to go through the site plan process. How long does that normally take?
It's a difficult one to answer. I often get this question. It really all depends on the submission. If they meet all the criteria and studies and drawings, et cetera, that are required for a complete submission. So it really depends on sort of that iterative process.
Does the zoning have to be ratified by council before they can initiate the site plan process?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that'd be the most cleanest approach, and the approach town has taken up to date.
Okay. So we've got a motion on the floor from Councillor Crone that, that this be ratified later today. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Okay, now I'm turning the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are at item L, Engineering and Public Works with Councillor Leahy in the chair.
Thank you very much. L for Leahy today. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The Engineering and Public Works Department, there are 3 items on the agenda today. And the first item is a Public Works report, request for a proposal, an RFP award, peer review support services contract award, and a fill management and site alteration. Can I have a mover for this, please? Thank you, Councillor Crone. And would General Manager Molinari like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, just for council information, this is a standard procurement report for the award of engineering peer review services for our development submissions and also for our site alterations. So Burnside is a consultant who currently provides these services for the town, and we're pleased to continue using them for our services. So happy to answer any questions.
Do any members of council have a question? Yes, Councillor Johns.
There we go. I just wanted clarification through you, Madam Chair. Like this large contract amount, it is not coming from an operating budget. It is coming from our DCs, and we are recovering these funds. This isn't residents paying for these through their taxes.
Mr. Molinari, would you please answer the question for Councillor Johns? Thank you.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. These fees are actually paid for by the developer himself, and the town actually collects a 10% fee on top of that. So there's no cost to the town. It's actually slightly revenue generating.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Roy-Clemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my concern is is in a similar fashion. We had 11 plan takers, 2 proposals, but only 1 met the technical threshold. Do we have an understanding of why that's the case?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's taking it out on the open market. Not all consultants want to be doing work for the town because sometimes there's a conflict of interest with actually doing the work for the developers. So there's a select few that will actually do this work, and Burnside has aligned themselves well with other municipalities to do this sort of thing, and they're very, very good at it. And they provided us with very good service over the years. So.
Are there any other questions from council regarding this item? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor? And the resolution is moved. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 2. The contract award P-24-004 water compliance software solution. And can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Foster. And General Manager Molinari, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This is another standard procurement report to award new software applications called Compliance 365, which allows the town to better manage the water system with improved functionality and efficiency. The new software will provide significant improvements over our existing software, including the ability to handle multiple water parameters, manage training records, and direct data sharing with the MECP, which we have current software right now, but it actually isn't supportable anymore. So we're actually looking for a new solution, and this one I think will help us to be a little more efficient and provide us with some extra tools in the process. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Councillor Leahy. Just trying to get a better understanding. So the new software, it is a 5-year contract. We are paying for licensing annually over the course of the 5 years. So the solution, 116,000, but then it's another 10,000 every year. Like when we get to the end of 5 years, do we have to buy it again, or is it just another 10,000, 10,000? Like how does this work?
Through you, Madam Chair. My understanding is that we would pay this, we would have use of it for 5 years, and then going forward, we already have the software. It would just be those continuing costs on an annual basis. So at the end of 5 years, we'll see if there's other things on the market or if this was serving us well. So it basically just a snapshot in time to give us 5 years worth of good service with some good software, and then we can move forward after at that point.
Very good. Any other questions? It looks like you might have one, Councillor Johns, to follow up, or did that answer your question? Yeah.
It did. I was just thinking again. So for clarity, like the 60,000, is that because it's a 5-year contract? Are we paying 12,500 a year, or are we just paying, or is that?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the extra 60,000 is for provisional items. So that actually helps the town to track our licensing and training solution. With the water system, there's a requirement that all of our operators have a certain amount of training. They all have to, and that all has to be tracked. So this software helps us to do all those things and manage that system so that we're not out of compliance.
So clarity, it is not software licensing, it is licensing of the users.
It's actually for the software. It's our software. So our staff will go out and get certified. They'll get a certificate. That certificate will find its way into this software and be tracked. And so that when they need retraining, we will be reminded of their retraining, and we'll make sure that they're retrained so that we meet our obligations through the MECP.
Great business model. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on item number 2 regarding the water compliance software solution? Seeing none, I'd like to call for the vote. All those in favor? And that has passed. So moving on to the last item, item number 3, the industrial, commercial, and institutional ICI sanitary allocation update regarding the services memo. Can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Crone, thank you. And General Manager Molinari, do you have anything you'd like to address with this?
Yes, and through you, Madam Chair. So this is a good news story. Couple council meetings ago, we came to council advising that there were some issues with our ICI allocation. We prepared a letter to the region, and we were very successful with obtaining some ICI allocation. We got half of what we asked for, but that should be more than enough to bridge us over the next couple of years. And then hopefully have enough allocation through the YDSS expansion project to be able to sustain this, our ICI kind of going forward. So just wanted to bring this to council's attention as a good news story and to say that we're okay for the time being and for the foreseeable future for ICI allocation.
Are there any questions from members of council? Yes, Councillor Johns.
I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Molinari. Like I know he and his team worked very, very hard on this and with the region, and there was a lot. It wasn't a fixed amount of time that you just asked, and that was that. Like there was a lot of time, a lot of months that went into this. So I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate how hard you worked on this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I would like to add my own personal comments as the chair of the department to General Manager Molinari and the team members who are here today. It's not a good news story. It's a great news story. It's a fantastic news story. So I think we should be celebrating that success. And so thank you for that work. And so we're going to vote now. If there are no other questions, we'll vote on this item. All those in favor? and that has passed. And are there any other general comments or questions regarding any matter to do with this Engineering and Public Works Department for General Manager Molinari? Seeing none, I will pass the chair back to Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no items listed under M to P of the agenda, and
Madam Mayor? May I?
Yes.
Yes. I would like to ask a question of this, under this administration section of our agenda.
go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. On Friday, June 21st, council members received an email regarding the delegation of power for the organizational structure as well as the hiring and firing, et cetera, for the town of East Gwillimbury. And so for clarity, for my own clarity, as well as for clarity of the residents, I would like to understand the purpose of this delegation of power and the timing of it.
It is not on the agenda, however, it leaves staff without doing their homework to have the right answers for you, but I'll pass it over to staff, and if we need another date, then so be it. Your light is not on there.
There's obviously too many buttons on this microphone. Always been technically challenged, and this is evidence of that. I think, Madam Mayor, the question pertains to a delegation that was signed under the Strong Mayor's legislation and is posted publicly, and a copy of the resolution or the direction was given to all members of council. Is that correct, Madam?
It's the one I'm referring to that's
Yes.
posted on the town website. Yes, thank you.
So this delegation is, in a nutshell, simply to return to our Chief Administrative Officer the responsibilities for the organizational structure of the organization, which includes the ability to hire and dismiss the general managers who report to Mr. Valchit, which was his responsibility prior to those powers being transferred through the legislation to the head of council, being the Madam Mayor. So that's all this delegation does, and it's self-explanatory. Thank you.
Are you okay? You're okay with that?
And just a further follow-up question for clarity's purposes. Is this a procedure that will be required to be done on an annual basis, or is this a one-time delegation of power?
Through you, Madam Mayor, a delegation in this case is always revocable, and it's not a one-time thing. It could be changed at any time in the future. It's not subject to any schedule. It's simply subject to the head of council's decision in that regard, which is vested in Madam Mayor by virtue of the Strong Mayor's legislation.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, the way I read this, I think you've accomplished what we wanted to achieve back in September when we were dealing with this, when we wanted to shed, you wanted to shed the strong mayor powers, but have all the other features of the legislation intact. So I think you found a loophole. So
Perhaps.
that's the way I read it.
Perhaps. Any other comments, questions? There are no other items listed under M to P of the agenda, and are there any updates from committee at this time? Not seeing any, we will move to Q, and that is an adjournment. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried, and that would be at 5:05 PM. Thank you.
Back here at 6.